A whale is a mammal that lives entirely in water, yet its ancestors once walked on four legs. Not metaphorically. They had ankles, toes, weight-bearing limbs, and bodies built for land. Over tens of millions of years, those legs shrank, the nostrils moved backward, and the tail became the main engine. Today, a blue whale can outweigh almost every animal that ever lived. So how did an ordinary-looking land mammal become one of the largest creatures on Earth? Travel back more than 50 million years, long before modern whales existed. The planet looked different, oceans were warmer, and mammals were rapidly filling ecological niches. Among them were early relatives of whales, such as Pakicetus. If you saw Pakicetus alive, you probably would not shout, "Whale!" You might cautiously say, "Why is that strange dog staring at me?" It had 4 functional legs and moved on land. Its skull was long, with teeth suited for eating meat, but hidden inside its head was an important clue. The structure around its inner ear had features strongly associated with whales. That tiny anatomical signature helped paleontologists connect this terrestrial-looking animal with the cetacean family. Evolution had not built a whale yet. It had something standing near the shoreline, and shorelines offered opportunities. Water contained fish and other prey. Entering shallow rivers or coastal environments could open food sources unavailable to animals staying exclusively on land. Over generations, individuals better suited to exploiting water could leave more descendants. Nobody decided to become aquatic. There was no prehistoric mammal staring at the ocean and announcing a career change. Natural selection simply kept favoring useful variations. Then things became much stranger. Around 48 million years ago lived Ambulocetus, an early whale whose name roughly means walking whale. This animal still had substantial legs, but its hands and feet were enlarged. Its body was increasingly suited for swimming. Evidence from fossils, sediment, and oxygen isotopes suggests it spent considerable time around aquatic environments, probably including estuaries where freshwater and saltwater mixed. Imagine something between a powerful land predator and an aquatic ambush hunter. It could support itself on land. But water was becoming its competitive advantage. This is where whale evolution becomes especially fascinating. The transition was not one clean ladder. Different early whale species experimented with different lifestyles. Some stayed closer to shore. Others became increasingly marine. Multiple forms existed during overlapping periods, creating a branching evolutionary story rather than a parade where one species simply transformed into the next. As dependence on water increased, the whale body began changing dramatically. Legs became less important for propulsion. The spine became more useful for powerful vertical swimming movements. Forelimbs increasingly worked as control surfaces, and the tail gradually took responsibility for generating thrust. Eventually, early whales such as Basilosaurus and Dorudon were fully aquatic. Their bodies show evidence of powerful tail-driven swimming. Their hind limbs had become extremely reduced and were no longer useful for walking. That created a wonderfully strange evolutionary snapshot. Picture a long marine predator swimming through an ancient ocean with tiny legs still attached. Those legs were leftovers from a terrestrial past. Modern whales retain echoes of that history. Inside their bodies are reduced pelvic structures associated with the hind limbs their ancestors once possessed. But losing functional legs was only part of the transformation. Breathing had to change too. Early whales had nostrils near the front of their snouts, much like terrestrial mammals. Across later forms, those nasal openings shifted progressively backward along the skull. Eventually, in modern whales, the breathing opening sits high on the head as the blowhole. That is an enormous advantage when you live underwater. A whale can surface, expose only a small portion of its body, breathe rapidly, then disappear again. Evolution did not suddenly relocate the nose. Small anatomical changes accumulated across enormous stretches of time. Swimming changed. Breathing changed. Limbs changed. The spine changed. The entire body became increasingly streamlined for life in water. But one important feature never disappeared. Whales remained mammals. They breathe air with lungs. They are warm-blooded. Mothers produce milk for their young. Their ancestors did not become fish. They became mammals specialized so completely for water that their terrestrial origin became difficult to recognize without fossils, anatomy, and genetics. And those genetic relationships deliver another surprising clue. Whales belong within the even-toed ungulate branch of mammals, and their closest living relatives are hippopotamuses. That does not mean whales evolved from modern hippos. Instead, whales and hippos share an older common ancestor. Their lineages separated long ago and followed very different evolutionary routes. One remained associated with land and freshwater. The other eventually conquered the open ocean. Some early whales even crossed substantial marine distances while still retaining recognizable legs. Fossils of protoceted whales found in places including the southeastern United States show that these animals were already spreading across ancient oceans before the classic modern whale body had completely evolved. That makes the transformation even more remarkable. Whales did not wait until evolution produced the perfect swimming machine. There was never a perfect machine. There were populations surviving with whatever combination of traits worked well enough at that moment. Over millions of generations, good enough kept changing. Eventually, the descendants looked nothing like the animals that began the journey. 4 weight-bearing legs became almost invisible remnants. Paddle-like forelimbs became flippers. A terrestrial spine became part of an extraordinary swimming system. Nostrils at the end of a snout became a blowhole on top of the head. And descendants of relatively small land mammals ultimately produced giants like the blue whale. That is the real payoff hidden inside a whale. When one surfaces off the American coast, you are not simply watching an animal adapted to the ocean. You are watching the surviving result of an ancient transition written into bones, genes, lungs, limbs, and skulls. Evolution did not erase the whale's history. It remodeled it. And beneath that enormous ocean body, the blueprint still carries traces of an ancestor that once stood on solid ground.